Right after the unseasonal thunderstorm and rainfall in Delhi a few days ago, power supply in some areas of West Delhi continues to be hit. This even as the death toll from the thunderstorm that lashed north and east India on Friday has risen to 50 now.
Scorching heat of Delhi summer suddenly gave way to dark clouds, gusting winds and total chaos. When the storm blew past, the capital was left reeling, trees were knocked down, traffic jams for miles, metro lines impacted, flights stalled.
Wind thick with sand, laced with stones, lash around rescue workers. Another sandstorm in northwest China, this time in Tulufang city, trapping hundreds in their cars on the highways.
The wind was quite strong, and the flying stones broke the glass on the vehicles. We had nowhere to hide.
On the Tulufang Toksin highway, rescuers barely held on themselves during gale force winds. Visibility reduced to less than 2 meters. They attached ropes between the trapped cars and the rescuing armored vehicle. The priority, getting the elderly, women and children in first. Sandstorms have become an increasingly regular feature of life in North China, the result of decades of desertification and the Gobi Desert creeping further south.
A powerful sandstorm quickly shifted from irritating to deadly as it wreaked havoc in Tehran. Winds riling up to 110 kilometers per hour were recorded as residents told of darkness descending upon the city.
Visibility reduced to near zero. When you hear that 5 people were killed and 30 people were injured in a big city like this, I mean, it's really amazing.
Such strong storms are unusual in Tehran, but the government's warned the bad weather may last until Wednesday.
Heavy rain has battered parts of southwest China, with devastating floods damaging roads and residential areas. More than 1,000 vehicles across the country have been trapped by the torrential downpour, and rescue efforts are being made to clear the streets.
In rural areas, around 300 landslides have been reported. Local authorities say the floods have toppled 859 houses and affected some 586,000 residents in the province.
A reservoir in the Gwangju province burst during a rainstorm, bringing water levels to about 1.3 meters. The sudden storm began on Monday, and local Weather Bureau authorities expect rain and flooding to continue in the coming days.
There's the Pavlov volcano erupting in Alaska. Take a look. That is a huge cloud of ash and steam, all of it shooting up some 24,000 feet above sea level. You can see the cloud there up above the volcano.
The volcano has actually been erupting for years, but not this intensely.
Tonight, a second blast of severe storms marching across the Ohio and Tennessee valleys and western plains, packing baseball-sized windshield-busting hail. At these car dealerships, hail damage costing $15 million. In Omaha, rescues by raft. Strong winds in Kansas knocking over train cars. Tonight, neighborhoods are in tatters and pickup trucks are busy.
At least 50 people have been drowned in severe floods in Afghanistan. Flash floods followed torrential rains in Baghlan province, where 2,000 homes and 4 entire villages were washed away. Fields and their crops disappeared underwater, and thousands of animals were killed.
One of the survivors says at least 74 people had died in the flash floods caused by heavy rain overnight.
A large area of France is on alert for severe storms for a second day. On Sunday night, damaging winds gusting to over 110 kilometers per hour and tennis ball-sized hailstones battered the Val d'Oise department near Paris. In neighbouring Yvelines, emergency services said there were over 440 weather-related calls. No injuries have been reported.
Let's shift focus on the latest on the heat wave now, and there's no sign of that abating, and life is continuing to be difficult for North India with the mercury breaking all barriers. Delhi yesterday touched a record high of 47.8 degrees Celsius. That was a 62-year-old high. Punjab, Haryana, Delhi, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, even parts of Uttar Pradesh are going to remain dry today. Well, fire season is upon us as huge flames burn through thousands of acres near Bend tonight. Firefighters say the Two Bulls wildfire has charred at least 6,800 acres of mostly brush and timber.
The Two Bulls fire is still growing, nearly 7,000 acres. That's over 10 square miles. More than 700 firefighters have been called in to fight. It's exhausting work.
Firefighters have only contained 5% of this fire so far. Fortunately, no buildings have been damaged, nor has anyone been hurt by the flames. The site of the opening ceremony and first World Cup match under turmoil, floods, strikes, and protests. The backdrop on the eve of the biggest sporting event in the world, in the country that treats soccer like religion.
This morning, more bad luck for Brazil. Flooding near Sao Paulo Tuesday claimed the lives of 9 people.
Now, tornado and Korea are two words you would never normally hear in the same sentence, but you will now because a tornado was spotted in Korea earlier this week. News of this twister, coupled with freak thunderstorms and torrential rain showers in recent days, has people asking if it's all down to climate change.
The effects of climate change are being seen across the globe through abnormal weather events, and Korea is no exception, as evidenced by the last few days. A tornado near Ilsan in Gyeonggi-do province this Tuesday was the first ever spotted on the mainland.
At least 5 people have been killed in violent storms that swept across northern Germany overnight. The deaths occurred in the cities of Düsseldorf, Essen and Cologne. Severe thunderstorms, strong winds and torrential rain in the country's most populous state, North Rhine-Westphalia, blocked roads and forced the suspension of public transport. Gusts of up to 150 kilometers per hour were reported at Germany's third largest airport in Düsseldorf. It was closed for an hour and all flights diverted.
For the superstitious, Friday was a double whammy. The full moon peaked on Friday the 13th, which might cause some people to consider staying home. Those two things last happened on the same day 13 years ago, but won't happen again until August of 2049. Full moons in June are called honeymoons, rose moons, or strawberry moons, but the air above Los Angeles last night turned into an unusual orange color.
У тебя с этого, с другого конца что летает. Ну, твою мать! Смотри, я это заснял!
Around 25 homes have been completely destroyed by a landslide in the World Cup host city of Natal. A record amount of rain fell within 48 hours. The houses in the May Louisa neighborhood are by the coast in the key tourist area overlooking the Atlantic Ocean. Nobody was injured in the landslide, but many people lost their belongings and homes. Civil defense officials and the Red Cross were controlling the access to the area, which was closed for safety reasons. Officials say that 50 to 60 families, some 125 people, were evacuated to schools or churches. It's currently the rainy season in the area, but the severity of the rains was unusual for Natal, which is also known by the nickname of the City of the Sun.
Did you know that in the last 6 months, no state has experienced more significant earthquakes than Oklahoma? In fact, a 4.2 quake was felt Monday morning in Tulsa, and Al, this is not an area we think of earthquakes.
Since the beginning of this year, Oklahoma has had 200 quakes of magnitude 3 or higher. That's more than a 50% increase, and more quakes than have shaken California this year. Geologists suspect the increase is caused by wastewater from natural gas fracking being pumped deep underground, adding pressure to normally stable fault lines. The industry denies that.
It doesn't get more dramatic than this. Not one, but 2 tornadoes touched down in the northeast of Nebraska, only a mile apart.
Today, the National Weather Service said one tornado was an EF4 with winds as high as 200 miles an hour.
Local residents were evacuated after homes and buildings were stuck in the center of one twister. Half the town was heavily damaged and several farming communities nearby have also been destroyed.
They say the dual tornadoes are very unusual because both appear to have been roughly the same strength. In most cases, one tornado tends to be larger and more powerful than the other, but infrastructure and communities here didn't stand a chance.
The Nebraska governor has now declared a state of emergency and police have closed all roads around Pilger.
To other news now, and thousands of people in Ontario are without power tonight after some wild and sometimes frightening weather.
It started with the rain, lightning, then the wind. People in Angus, Ontario watching an apparent tornado touching down in their community, catching many by surprise. It took just minutes for the suspected funnel to rip apart more than 30 homes.
Heavy rain and strong winds have struck central Italy, causing severe flooding in parts of Rome and surrounding areas. Roads were closed as torrents of water rushed along streets and down subways. With more rain forecast in the coming days, several regions, including Umbria, are on storm alert.
A series of earthquakes occurring in the northwestern reaches of Alaska has been classified as a swarm and is proving tough to explain for scientists. All have occurred since mid-April and been the same magnitude, each being classified as 5.7 quakes. They've also been followed with significant aftershock activity. Hundreds of them have occurred, some measuring a magnitude of 4 or greater. Those living in the village of Noatak are concerned that a seriously big quake could be next, but scientists don't see that the pattern supports that thinking. One researcher investigating the phenomenon said, "There is nothing to suggest a larger earthquake. Earthquake swarms are characterized by earthquakes of the same size. But I would be lying if I said there's no possibility of a larger earthquake." Thus far, no significant damage has been done to the people or properties in Noatak. Scientists have been unable to pinpoint the cause of the swarm. There's no presence of any of the usual suspects, such as volcanoes and geothermal sites. Further, there's not a lot of recorded data for such happenings in the area, so looking for information in historic precedents hasn't been possible.
New images tonight of a new and massive twister. This time you can see what appears to be 4 funnels inside this sweeping tornado.
This was the moment across the prairies of South Dakota when families here knew they had to run for cover.
2 on the ground at once.
Another set of twin tornadoes were moving into Wessington Springs. When it hit 15 miles east, you could see 4 smaller whirlwinds circling inside one of the tornadoes. These were pictures families took with their cell phones. Early reports show the winds reached 127 miles an hour, damaging more than a dozen homes and destroying businesses. The severe weather stretched east, the lightning setting homes on fire in Minnesota, the high winds bringing down trees over homes in Ohio and the nation's capital. In Chicago, 1,400 passengers stranded by the weather had to sleep at O'Hare Airport.
The pounding rain in Texas, a foot of rain in 24 hours, all the way north of Minneapolis.
More, Minnesota is expected to ask for federal help after record-setting rain that caused flooding and landslides around Minneapolis and St. Paul.
In Bulgaria, at least 16 people are reported to have been killed after torrential rains and floods hit the east of the country. In the port city of Varna, the scene of some of the worst destruction, a state of emergency has been declared. Many drivers had to be rescued after the sudden flash flooding swept away their cars. Hundreds of residents have also been left without electricity. The Black Sea resort of Varna saw extensive damage. Torrential rain swept away cars, destroyed homes and forced residents to flee to rooftops.
2 big earthquakes in less than an hour in opposite parts of the Pacific have scientists at the USGS wondering whether one caused the other.
Scientists say it was unusual to see such a big earthquake. In that part of Alaska, there have only been 5 large quakes there in the past century.
Emergency services in Melbourne are working through 2,500 calls for help, triggered by damaging winds over the past 24 hours. Trees have crashed into homes, walls have collapsed, and part of the Middle Brighton Pier has crumbled into the water.
Meanwhile, high water in Fort Worth, Texas trapped a pregnant woman in the middle of a street, and more rain today in Minnesota could make things even worse. Part of this amusement park near the Twin Cities is already underwater. 35 Minnesota counties declared flood emergencies.
People in Toronto are now drying out after a very wet and stormy night. The city was drenched by heavy rain and localized flooding. Part of the Don Valley Parkway was closed. Underpasses were submerged and a subway station was briefly shut down because of rising water levels. Firefighters had to rescue a few motorists who were stranded by flooding. The water got as high as their vehicles' doors.
An unsettling story on the south end of the Strand tonight, where at least 1 million dead fish were found in the Winyah Bay. DNR officials say their carcasses were spread 6 miles from the site of the fish kill. South Carolina Department of Natural Resource Officer Dean Kane says that a fish kill normally happens in July or August, and it's rarely of this magnitude.
Well, some of you might have felt it. We had an earthquake last night in Arizona, a big one, because a 5.2 magnitude quake centered in eastern Arizona near the New Mexico border.
A fairly rare occurrence here in Arizona. I say fairly rare. It's actually a very rare occurrence here in Arizona.
New Mexico hasn't had a 5.0 or greater hit the state in almost a decade.
3 people are missing, feared dead after a landslide in southwestern China. 4 villagers were gardening when parts of the mountain gave way, burying them under tons of debris.
Rescuers rushed to the site to search for the victims and evacuate local residents as large rocks continued to fall down the hill. It's thought the landslide was triggered by recent heavy rain in the area.
The central government said this year's floods are worse than in previous years, and the country is facing growing pressure to prevent secondary disasters, including debris flows and landslides. The central government has allocated 59 million yuan of disaster funds to support the affected areas.